Good morning or afternoon, if it's afternoon. Welcome to an unexpected podcast. This is Matt in Boston. I'm being joined by Evan in Ireland and Mick in the UK. And we recognize it's been a while. The world has shifted a little bit and our circumstances have all changed. So um, I know I'm working more. Mick is clearly working more and still traveling the world to keep it safe for democracy. So um, these these podcasts have necessarily gotten more sporadic, but we're still going to get together every once in a while and put something out, especially as when we have some new stuff to say. So today we're going to be talking about some new figure teasers that we've gotten. We'll talk about that briefly. And we're going to have a discussion of what, for lack of a better term, I'm going to call meta stagnation, which is it's something that's being discussed, certainly amongst our group, and I think amongst other groups. And I guess if I had to describe it in a sentence, I would say that the list building ideas at a competitive level are starting to get stuck in a rut. So we're going to discuss whether that's happening, if it's happening, what that rut is, and maybe some ways to kick the meta out of that rut. And then after that, we are going to discuss a 625 point dwarf list. So with that said, let's go forward and let's see these new figures that we have been promised.
Yeah, how dare GW be releasing anything? Haven't they heard that the game is dead?
Yes, they've heard the game is dead, and this is really just a memorial to the game. Yeah. These are Knights of Arnor, which they have basically said are going to have a similar. They haven't put out a profile, but I think they basically said that these guys are going to have the same profile as the Warriors. So I think we can safely assume fight 4, strength 3, defense 6. And given that they seem to have like that same spear that the guys on foot have in a couched position, and seeing as how they are saying that the Arnor warriors on foot will be the dismount guys for these, I would assume they are going to have a war spear.
I think the way to confirm that would be scrolling down slightly on the article. But yeah, I would assume they have a war spear too.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I don't
yeah,
think
heavy armor,
so they
shields,
did.
and war spears.
Okay, got it. Cool.
How many points do you think they're gonna be? Because normally horses on warriors are like 6 points probably. So for a
So
squadron probably eight. With six
horses
being
are
six.
5 points as a rule generally, like Royal Guard, and other models usually spend 5 points for them.
Then yeah,
Um,
because I think Dol Amroth spends six, but that's armored horse. So
Bill Amroth spends 8, and
eight.
that is
Yeah.
armored
Okay.
horse, yeah.
Yeah. So this is
But
Yep.
5 points,
just
and
just
this is gonna
glancing
be
at the
underpriced.
horse, yeah, it doesn't look armored to me, so it's
No.
probably going to be a normal horse. So swapping a spear for a war spear is 0 points
Mhm.
generally because like with
It's a
serpent
spear.
guards when they're mounted, they don't spend any extra points.
Mhm.
Um, so if just going by like the rules, they'd be 13, which in my opinion is for a model with a lance, fight 4, and defense 6 on a horse is very, very cheap.
Mhm.
Um,
Because Warriors of Minas Tirith, or the Knights of Minas Tirith, they are 14 for same stats except fight 3.
Well,
Well,
they
there's
yeah.
plus one courage.
Plus, well, so I mean, so if they use Knights of Minas Tirith as a model, you'd use the Knights of Minas Tirith with shield, which is 14 points.
Mhm.
Um, and then you'd be adding a fight value but subtracting a courage. That should net out again at 14 points. But I think Knights of Minas Tirith pay a point for a shield wall. Because
um,
they do have that special rule. I don't know if that's worked in their point value or not.
It's weird. I think they do, because actually no, Warriors of Minas Tirith don't pay a point for Shield Wall. It's just that Warriors of Arnor are 1 point undercosted, um,
mhm.
along with being ridiculously efficient in which on what the points do. Right. Like their courage is very low and their combat stats are very high. Um,
Are are they
so
are they 1 point undercosted? I thought it was just that they basically get a 1 point bonus for the lower courage,
so
which
they are
tends not
one
to be that
point
important.
undercosted and they get Hatred Angmar for free.
Okay, so
That's
they got
why,
hate.
in my opinion, like they're one of the best warrior models in the game. Um,
Right. So they're 8 points.
with a
Are they
shield and a spear.
right? So they're the same as a warrior of Minas Tirith. Oh, I see. With a warrior of
With
Minas
a
Tirith
shield.
with a
Yeah.
shield and a spear. Yeah, I gotcha. I
Yeah.
gotcha. So all right. So 13 or 14 points. We'll see.
Yeah. I hope for my own sanity that they're 14, because if
Hmm.
they're 13, then a, a silly list being Angmar will just get sillier. Because they already have the most undercosted troop in the game and a dumb 5-up save special rule from Malbeth and auto pass courage from Arvidui. And now they've got probably the most efficient cavalry model in the game. Um, so I hope they're like 14, 15, but I could reasonably see them being 13 if they go the route of just chalking on the 5 point horse and
Yeah.
swapping the spear for the war spear.
I mean, they could give them an extra courage because they're, knights, right?
Yeah.
And make the
Though I
courage thing
think
have them
just
cost a
reading the
point more.
thing, I think you're supposed to be able to use Arnor warriors as dismounts,
Yeah, that's
so
right.
I doubt they'd change the courage,
That's
right?
fair.
Because then
Yep.
you'd have to designate which
Which
ones
ones
are
are
courage
knights?
3 and which ones are courage 2.
Mhm.
Yep. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Um, so all right, so we'll see. The other teaser, they're nice looking models though.
Yeah, the
Um,
horse models are actually pretty cool in that they're not gonna break like the plastic ones.
Yeah, I
Finally,
mean,
finally,
I
some
always
thought went through into this.
well,
they it looks like one of them has 1 point of contact, which
it
is
does.
slightly concerning.
Yeah, but
Um,
it's a pretty large point.
it is
Eh,
better than just one hoof, I'll give you
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
yeah,
Um,
it's a hoof and some grass. And then the other
but
one is two hooves.
Hmm.
as someone who is very clumsy, I always love cavalry models with 3 points of contact, and these look like they won't be that.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
that's a bit annoying.
yeah, I know that is a bit annoying, but I mean, it could just be high cost. I mean, the plastic that they're making stuff out of these days is a little tougher. I don't know whether these are going to have like the kind of the old style plastic or the new style plastic. Hopefully, it'll be the new style plastic, in which case, hopefully, it'll be kind of durable.
Yeah.
So we also got a teaser, and so just so folks know, there was this original teaser that showed up a little while ago, which was the horse's head, and that became these guys. And now we have this, um, which is this is the Arnor emblem and the stars on a little guidon on the end of a spear that's standing straight up. I mean, I assume this is not a banner because Arnor already has a banner. Um, so what are your thoughts on what doth this signify?
I mean, this actually
Hmm.
reminds me of the Elven Command banner. That's a similar one.
Yeah, but why have a second banner for Arnor?
Yeah. Can you scroll up for a second so I can see the cavalry model spears? Because I want
Yeah,
to see if they're
they don't have them.
okay. No, I meant the like looking at the spearhead and comparing it.
Oh
So they
yeah, no,
look pretty similar.
it's the same spearhead. There's no
So
question about that.
Well, could
yeah,
it be
so
mounted
I
banner then?
think it's either a mounted banner or some sort of Arnor hero, and I'm
Yeah.
gonna
Could
leave
could it be
that
a
to
whole
you
box
two
of
to
knights,
figure it
including a
out
banner?
because I don't know the Angmar heroes, not Angmar, the Arnor heroes. So
There's,
it could be like one of the kings or something.
yeah.
Don't know.
I mean, it could just be a mounted captain, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Ooh, a mounted captain with a war spear sounds scary. Because
yeah,
Or
Arnor
some
captains are
sort of
pretty
a
good.
named hero
yeah.
that's made up. Who knows?
Because I mean, what you could get is a box that has, like five of the cavalry, and then like somebody that could be one that's slightly different, so it's a mounted captain. Those have kind of been
Mm.
showing up, packaging wise. Because I mean, I guess logistically, right? GW has this thing where they only have like a certain number of like slots on warehouse shelves. So if you're going to put out like a mounted captain or some sort of mounted hero or something like that, if you work them in to a box that has the rest of the cavalry, they can, put that whole thing out as one. I mean, I think that's how the Rivendell Knights work too, right? They've got a banner option in the box, and they've got a captain option in
And
the
by a
box.
captain, you mean a guy without a helmet.
Exactly that.
Yeah. Yeah, haven't you like seen any like any medieval films? There's
That's
always,
right.
it's the named hero or any hero never wears a helmet.
Yep, that's right. Well, I mean, that was how Harold died at Hastings, right? Is everybody thought he was dead, so he took his helmet off so that everybody could see that he was still alive, and he was promptly shot in the face with an arrow. So, all right. Well, we'll see what this is. But we've got new figures coming out. That's a good thing.
Yeah. And not to start the whole speculation game, but I think we're all pretty sure that this means we're gonna get some sort of maybe Arnor Angmar supplement, something like that. Which
Yeah,
Lavar?
there has been a lot of speculation about that online. So speculation over werewolves and whatnot.
werewolves would be cool, but we'll see.
We'll see.
It's what everybody has been howling for.
Very funny, Dad.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. So on to our main topic, which I called meta stagnation, but this was something that Nick and Evan, you guys had been discussing. So I'm gonna throw the ball, I'm gonna throw the discussion ball, I'm gonna throw the discussion ball to Mick. So Mick, you've got the discussion ball.
Okay. Okay, I'm
Tell
gonna receive
tell
it.
us what you were thinking about.
No, so in the last year or so, year and a half, I've played maybe what, 6, 7 events or so. And what I've been noticing is something that's I'm sort of beginning to find the game a little bit boring in the last year or so, I suppose, to the point where even though I don't have a huge amount of time to attend events, I don't actually find myself even wanting to attend events at the moment because I've been to a few where the games I played, even though like my opponents were great, like everything was really nice, terrain was great, everything around it was good. The armies that I've been playing against have just been a bit bland sometimes, and I just found, like for example, I played at the GT 2 months ago in Nottingham, and I just found myself really not enjoying the game itself, possibly because I felt like a lot of it was getting a bit repetitious. So um, whether it's scenarios or whether it's armies you end up facing, I just generally found that um, the game is kind of getting to this grinding stall where armies are beginning to look very similar to each other. And I just, in general, always enjoy playing with lists that were a little bit more creative, like things which used to have fell beasts or used to have some sort of bigger toys that allowed you to do a lot of different things. But now all I'm seeing is, let's say, you do a breakdown of an event, and out of 60 armies, let's say 30 of them or 40 of them are evil, and there's like 15 Witch Kings. and you barely ever see any other ring wraith. And yeah, I've just been thinking that if it keeps going like this, then I'm probably gonna start attending less and less events. And I'm not really sure what like if there is a way to fix it. So I'm gonna throw my ball to Evan now. Catch.
I have received the hot potato, and I'll try my best not to pass it as quickly as possible. But um, so I'm seeing similar things to Mick. And granted, I have not. I've probably played in a bit more events recently than you have. But even just like in the last couple of months, I haven't really played in a lot of serious events due to life circumstances. But the last event I did play at was the WTC in Spain, and I got a lot of what you were getting as well, which was very sort of cookie cutter. This is winning sort of lists like Easterlings, um, Assault on Lothlorien, Black Numenorian spam, um, those sorts of lists that were just like it felt like I was playing against the same thing over and over. And I think it's been like a running theme on this podcast that anytime I ever go to a tournament, I will play against at least two Easterling lists. Um, I believe I played three at Nova.
Did you
I
play like against
played
4 ballista armies at last Articon or something like that? Something
that
silly
was the
like
Articon before.
Okay.
At the last
The
Articon,
meta has evolved, Mick. Keep up.
yes, the meta has evolved to at the last Articon, I played against three Easterling armies as
Oh
well.
yeah.
And then at the WTC, I played against two Easterling armies,
Yeah.
and then um, at some other places, I've also played against Easterling armies. Like it's just all Easterlings. Oh, and at the Dutch GG, I played against I think two or three Easterling armies as well. So it's definitely not the type of thing I like to play, where I usually like to see, oh, this is this sort of army. How am I going to beat this? And then never see it again for the rest of the tournament, and then see something different with a whole different play style and whole different mentality. Um, and it feels like now all of these lists with are designed to basically focus around their warriors. And this is another sort of interesting discussion point to bring up, which is that so many of the meta lists that are being played right now, whether it's um, whether it's the two big legendary legions, Assault on Lothlorien and Easterlings, whether it's Mordor, Black Numenorian, Suladan stuff, um, whether it's like Galadriel supported defense seven walls that just sit there and grind. Um, all these lists that are now becoming meta are very, very troop focused, and their heroes are generally very points efficient support heroes. So Emperor, Suladan, Galadriel, those sorts of models, the ones that aren't very proactive in and of themselves, but basically buff up your troops so that you can grind down the opponent and win. Um, and my problem with that is that's not how I like to play the game. I like Mick. I'm a very tricks focused player. That's why I like to play stuff like Angmar, where it's almost like I'm solving a puzzle. I'm trying to make it so I can set up these heroes in a specific spot, and then if I do this right, I get the win. I kill the big heroes. Whereas these games are you position your army and then you throw your two armies into each other and then you roll dice and see who rolls higher, and whichever army rolls better beats the other army, grinds them down, and then wins the scenario. And that's quite boring to me.
Yeah. So, for example, just before the ball gets passed to Matt, I was just gonna throw in that the thing you said about like tricks and things. So, the first time in quite some time that I had a really fun event was actually yesterday when I ended up taking something just off the shelf, which was Witch King and Felbeast, a catapult, a Shelob, and just a bramble of orcs. And that's when I was using this, I found the thing that you were talking about, where I was just sitting there trying to figure out ways to, in an interesting way, solve a puzzle and not actually just engage in like a standard shield wall type way. Because I knew basically if my army engages in a shield wall, it will just disintegrate. So I just found it a lot more interesting to play this sort of army. And so I kind of wish there were more armies like that out there.
Can I catch the, oops.
Yeah, catch it.
Okay. Well, I'm looking at my video and I am, okay.
You're teleporting around.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay? I guess that's the real question.
We can hear you fine.
All right. Okay. So I'm gonna have here, you know what? I'm gonna take myself off of video for a second because this is distracting even me. All right. So I'm now a disembodied voice. So before I start talking, because I've had a somewhat different experience from the two of you, and I want to explain, I think, why I've had the different experience. But before I do that, I want to ask a question. So Mick, have you played any games that weren't tournament games?
Yes. Well, I do meet up with friends about once or twice a month whenever I can.
Okay.
So I do tend to play a couple of games a month.
And how do you enjoy those games?
Both positively and negatively. Positively in that obviously it's like a non-competitive environment, but negatively in that the lists we use tend to be very similar to what people would be using in tournaments because of the idea is a lot of the time that we would be playtesting something that somebody would be taking to an event to beat
Gotcha.
something or just learning to use a list for an
Yep.
event.
Gotcha. All right. Evan, I think I know the answer to this, but I mean, how often do you play outside of a tournament setting?
You don't.
Yeah. So all right, so let me tell my tale. I mean, I've played in a number of local tournaments here. The last kind of serious competitive / international tournament I played in was the Dutch tournament in November. And I've done a series of kind of smaller local tournaments here. I've also been playing fairly regularly here outside of a tournament setting. And so I have really enjoyed both the smaller local tournaments and the non-tournament games that I'm playing here. Kind of much more than I've enjoyed the games at the quote competitive unquote tournaments that I've gone to recently. And you know, I think part of the reason behind that is that the approach I've taken both in the weekly games that I'm playing and the games I'm just taking to these smaller tournaments is I'm not going to I'm explicitly avoiding the super competitive lists that we've talked about. I know I'm known for playing Easterlings on the, you know, kind of competitive tournament scene, but if I'm not on a competitive tournament scene, I don't play that army. And what I'll do is I'll just take, or at least what I have been doing is I will just take an army that's like, I haven't played this army in a while. I'm just going to put together an army and I'm going to bring it. So yeah, I've been, you know, which is not to say that I've been saying like, well, I haven't played Ruffians in a while, so I'll bring my Ruffians out. I mean, I'm taking lists that are fun to play, but I'm taking lists that, you know, you don't normally see at tournaments. And I'm also taking pure lists. And and in general, I'm not taking legendary legions. So I went to a tournament with like just Lothlorien. I went to a tournament with just Iron Hills. And you
Oh
know,
yeah, I remember your pure Lake Town Thorns Company alliance that you took
yeah, so
to the
I
450 point
it was
thing
at
where you
least
killed a bunch of bears with Bilbo.
did kill a bunch of bears. It was at least a Green Alliance. I will say that. And for the stuff that I'm
Classic Lake Town cheater, but okay.
yeah, but okay. Look, it was what was it, like a 400-point tournament? Um, and and for the games that I'm playing at home, I'm just like there's a guy I've been playing with regularly who has like a Mordor army and a Harad army. So I'm like, all right, I'm gonna play through like every good army I have against these two armies because we're playing like weekly. And I don't want to play the same game over and over again. So I'll pull out the dwarves and we'll play a game. I'll pull out Gondor and we'll play a game. I'll pull out my Rivendell forces that I don't play with every once in a while. I'll just play a pure game. And those games had been really fun. And what they do is they produce games where it kind of comes down to the wire in most games. It does not produce games where like one side is obviously superior and throughout the game the other guy is just dying. And I've been finding that that's really what makes the game fun. I mean, you two have a personality type within the game that I think adds a different layer to this, in that you like playing with tricks, where I enjoy a good trick every once in a while, but I am perfectly happy to play out a
We're
shield
both
wall.
Lord of the Rings Tauruses and you're a Pisces or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, that's exactly it. I am perfectly happy. I enjoy a good shield wall game. I don't have any problem like playing an army whose strength is its warriors, which when you actually say it out loud kind of makes some sense.
I mean, if you have like two wizards, sure, that you can be blasting through the shield wall, sure, but
No, I
you
mean
cannot have double wizard.
one of the reasons I
Nick,
like
your
playing,
age is
So
showing here.
bland.
yeah,
It's
I mean
been a
one of the
little
reasons
while
I like
since anyone's been able to do that.
do two wizards.
Okay, if
I
you
mean,
can be
one,
tossing, if you can be throwing and like hurling models through the shield walls, that's
yeah.
fun too.
Um, yeah, no, well, look, it is, and that's more, I think, your personality type. I enjoy that less than I enjoy putting a shield wall on, making sure it's in the right place, capturing a flank, wrapping around the other guy's shield wall, and destroying him that way, or getting yourself in a position where you can secure your flanks by putting a shield wall and choke points, and then get a dominant get force superior on one side. I like playing the strategy of the moving the toys around the board to get an advantage and win that way. And I know you guys are more about, you know, I you know I have you guys are more about I have the cunning tactic and I've used the cunning tactic to win the game, whereas I'm more about I've come up with a superior strategy and I'm going to win the game through the superior strategy. And I'm not saying that one is better than the other. It's just two different ways of thinking. Um, but I think as you found out, Nick, when you get away from the what is the army I need to win the tournament and get more into the what is the army that's going to be fun to play, you're going to have kind of a better game experience. And if you win the tournament, great. If you don't win the tournament, that's fine. What you want is to end up with 4 or 5 games that are all like close and competitive and fun.
Yeah, no, for sure. So in the same way that with this event I went to the other day, was basically all of my games were extremely close, and in all of them, like literally like within a turn or two, I could have won or lost. I ended up winning two, losing two, and it was a non-competitive situation. So I found myself really enjoying it, and
Okay, I'm back.
um, and then another thing was last summer I went to a couple of events where I was trying out Riders of Thailand for the first time in my life, and I found that extremely fun to play. But then when I started throwing it against like all of the solid shield walls let's say, getting into like round 4, 5, 6, trying to play against better players, I was a lot of the time finding that because the army was like kind of like, I suppose, I suppose in a sense, the army was missing the sort of the fun things that I'm used to playing over the years, and I'm still struggling to find an army that I would really enjoy in this edition of the game, I suppose.
Well, so is it that, or is it that the army just kind of felt impotent once you got into the once you got into kind of the super predator lists that are dominating the top tables of competitive tournaments?
Well, so I then went and I would use the Super Predator list. Like I've played things like Witch King Suladan for years, and I found myself playing some mirror matches that I found extremely dull. And then I
Well,
would play against other lists where I would just find playing against other lists quite dull because of the nature of the list, of how solid it was.
all right. Well, let me pause for a second and let's unpack that a bit. Because what I thought I heard you say earlier was I took Riders of Theoden to
Uh-oh, lawyer's been activated.
Riders of
Uh-oh.
Theoden.
But I just heard you say 30 minutes ago, you directly contradicted your point you're making
no,
right now.
that's not my point. I'm trying to be more like counselor here than lawyer, because I want to make sure I understood what you said. Because I thought I heard you say that you took the Riders of Theoden and you were enjoying it to a point, and then you hit kind of the competitive players and it stopped being fun. Is that accurate or not?
It's not entirely that. It's because I did play Rise of Theoden in one of the first big tournaments that I took them to. I went 5-1, and I did play against some of the really good players in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
And I found it extremely fun regardless, because I was still kind of trying to trying to find ways with the list
Mm-hmm.
and figure it out and figure out how the list works.
Yeah.
Then once I figured out how this list works, I basically found the most optimal way of playing it. And then I realized that actually it doesn't have that many fun things going for it. As long as you're just following a certain strategy, you're probably gonna win X amount of time and probably gonna bounce off X amount of time.
Yeah.
And so
Okay.
I just generally found that like with more extreme things like Fell Beast back in the day, there was a lot more variance, a lot more things that you could do throughout the game, versus with a lot of lists these days, like I might play the Witch King Suladan, I'll get to play against Easterlings, and then I will play against Minas Tirith with Boromir, which is basically Easterlings. Then I'll play a mirror match. That's almost like Easterlings again.
Yeah. All right. So hang on, I gotta go off of video again. So yeah, I mean, all right. So again, for me, it's somewhat different, because if what you enjoy about the game is the strategy, that strategy is going to be dictated less by what your army can pull off and more by your opponent's army and the scenario that you're playing. So like when I play Riders of Theoden or Rohan, I can enjoy the different solving different puzzles that are created not by trying to figure out what my army can do, but by the fact that the army that I'm playing against is different and the scenario I'm playing is different and the deployments are going to be different.
That's the problem. What you've just said right there is the problem I have, which is that the armies aren't different.
Right.
The game plan I have in many different scenarios against many different, in quotation marks, armies, is very, very similar. Because as Mick was saying, like Minas Tirith is basically just Easterlings, you know, Mordor shield walls. God forbid you're playing against Arnor, where there's literally no thinking involved whatsoever.
I
I mean,
I don't think it's quite as bad as all
even
that,
you
but
even you have claimed that you find Arnor ridiculously boring to play.
I wouldn't say
Um,
ridiculously boring, but you're right. It is not Arnor is not my favorite list to play. It is more strategically reductionist than even I like, because it's the epitome of the vanilla army, right? It has
I mean, well,
two and a half troop types.
it's basically Minas Tirith without Boromir, but but with the +1 fight banner somehow built in.
No, because there's a variety of different ways you can build and fight Minas Tirith. There is
Yeah,
one
sure.
way to build and fight Arnor.
There is only one way for Arnor, yeah.
Yeah.
And it only
Which
really
doesn't
works
mean
on
it
a certain
isn't.
point level too.
Yeah, which doesn't mean that it isn't fun every once in a while, right? But it's not something you want to say, all right, this is going to be the army that I'm going to play for the next 6 months, because that gets boring. Um, but uh, but Minas Tirith, on the other hand, I mean, I could play Minas Tirith for a while, and because you can rotate through a number of different builds, right? This is my Faramir base build. This is my Boromir base build. This is my Boromir and Faramir base build. This is
me when I win a
Stop,
tournament with my
stop
Faramir
there.
based build.
Faramir base build.
yeah.
What's that monstrosity?
Well, no, I mean it's the Ranger heavy of Asgiliath veteran type thing, and
Oh,
you
but that's not
can.
Minas Tirith. That's Rangers. That's a different army
Oh no,
entirely.
I mean it's still Minas Tirith, right? Because it's still the same figures.
It's
And
Sicilian, yes.
and you
The
have.
problem is that a lot of this variety is is not competitively viable. And I get your point that like, you know, if you take this like this pure stuff in this different stuff that isn't as competitively viable, then you'll have more fun at like local tournaments and stuff like that. My main concern is that I want to win. I have fun winning, and I also have fun playing these particular armies. And now it's getting to a point where I can't combine these two things. Um, and there are a lot of players like that who want to compete at the highest level, but also want to do it with armies that matter to them and work well for them. And the fact that we have lost that variety in the meta and that it's all sort of decomposed into these very grindy strategic style armies causes lack of variety and, as we were discussing, stagnation. And I think part of that problem is the game is old, right? People have we also haven't had releases in a while, which I think is part of it. But people have started to figure out what is good and what is not. And we've lost that sort of experimental, I'm just going to take something and see if it works phase. And now people are like, okay, I know what's good. I know how to solve this meta. Um, and the way it's been solved ends up causing a lot of people who want to compete at a high level to get bored because what works is not what they like to play.
I
Yeah.
mean, so
So
it does happen sometimes that there is a fun list out there. Like for example, recently there was a tournament that Jakub won, and that was and he managed to have multiple chariots from Kant. And
right,
so
but
when I saw
why?
that, I was like, wow, that's actually that's the sort of list I would love to see more of.
Yeah,
But then
but why was that, Nick? I mean, that happened at a particular tournament at a particular
it
points level.
was, yes.
And I mean, as I understand it, it was what was the points level for it? Was it 500?
600,
600,
I think.
yeah.
Yeah.
And what it was a circumstance where the meta at 600 points had collapsed. The conventional meta at 600 points had collapsed down to armies like Army of Lake Town and armies like Hunter Works that get a lot of cheap warriors that are defense 4 and they swarm. And Jakob was like, all right, I can counter program this. All right, I got to go off video again. This is just not working. I can counter program this and come up and bring my chariots and just run over all these defense 4 guys, which is perfectly viable at that points level in that particular meta.
That's right. Yeah.
But it's not exportable, right? You start taking that to tournaments at 800 points or tournaments with a lot of terrain, and you're going to end up with a bunch of problems.
Oh, yeah, of course. You're going to win like 2 out of 6.
Yeah.
800 points or 1 maybe.
But I mean, what ended up happening there is because of something in the tournament, right? The particular points level of that tournament and probably the type of terrain that was on the table, it created a circumstance where the normal meta could be gamed, or basically it changed the meta for in that particular microcosm. But Evan, I think you hit the nail on the head, right? The game has now been around enough and it has been unchanged that, as with all competitive endeavors, the ideal strategies have been identified and are being used by the folks who are most competitive. And I mean, this isn't unique to SBG. This isn't even unique to miniature wargaming. This happens in sports, right?
Oh yeah, of course.
I mean, when a sport has been going on for a particularly long point in time, it ends up getting won or lost by at like the Olympic level. Things get won or lost by like these minor variations in how well people can execute the strategy that everybody knows is the ideal one. And that's the circumstance we're in now. I mean, is that what I'm hearing? I mean, that's what I heard from you, Evan. Did I characterize it right?
Yeah, that's basically what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say I fully agree with that. And the other thing is that especially in the UK, for example, like last year there was like 120, almost 119 tournaments that were part of the league. If you have that many events, and some people go to like 15 or 20 events a year, then eventually it's very easy to solve things and figure things out what's going to be best, especially when you're also getting more and more people getting on podcasts, more and more people sharing lists online, etc. So we've this edition came out 6 years ago almost.
Mm-hmm.
So I suppose in other games, like for example, Magic the Gathering is one of those games which has always had this like a similar sort of meta situation, except there would be a new expansion released every 3 months, and the meta game would be changing like within 3 months, and then completely flopping into new mechanics every year or so.
Yeah.
But with this, with like only one major edition every few years, then that's just a natural thing that's going to happen.
So how do we fix this then? Because look, I mean, there's 2 ways the meta can change. One is kind of internal to GW, which is you put out new figures, you put out new rules, you put out a new edition, you put out new books. But if your name isn't Jay Clare, you can't execute that. Mm-hmm. But I mean, there are ways you can change the meta external to GW if you're running tournaments, right? And I mean, one of the ways you can do that is you can put restraints on what types of armies people can bring. And I'm not advocating banning certain lists, because that descends into a rabbit hole of, but you're banning my favorite army, why would you do this horrible thing to me? But I'm wondering if at least part of the solution is, which a number of people have done, is to put limitations on um, on certain alliances and certain things like that.
See, I wouldn't go the limitation route. I would
Yeah.
actually go the opposite direction because there was a tournament recently in the UK where you had where every person was able to bring a special banner, and let's
Yeah.
say a banner gave all of your troops within 6 inches +1 fight value, or there was a banner that basically worked like Gambling's banner, or another one that gave
The one that
you
everybody took.
yeah. So basically, that was a great idea in general. In that you had like 5 or 6 different banners that all seemed interesting, and then almost everybody took the might banner.
Yeah.
But
Though that it was nice though because
it was really cool. Yeah.
I saw that the Jakob won and he won with Angmar and I was so excited to see like what sort of like cool tricky Angmar list had won and it of course was a grindy shield wall Angmar list with the shade but I'll take what I can get.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think if your meta centers around like throwing in an additional banner, you're gonna gravitate more towards shield wall stuff.
Yeah, it's not a fix.
Yeah. But I mean, one potential fix is if you go like no alliances or no green alliances or only green alliances rather. That's that is a potential fix. You still end up with, I mean, the one and you just kind of ban legendary legions. The one problem or the one problem I see with that is there's a couple of the hyper competitive lists that are pure, right? One of them is Mordor, the Witch King with a bunch of Black Numenorias in front of him, and another is Goblin Town. There may be others that I'm just not thinking of, but
Arnor.
yeah, I
I
got
mean, to be fair, like I haven't seen Goblin Town do that well for a long time.
Yeah, Goblin Town is in an interesting place where where lists are sort of adapting to better be able to handle it. Though actually, I think at City of Steel, the tournament with the banners, there was a Goblin Town list that was top table final round, and then lost to the Angmar list because it's Angmar and they're playing Goblin Town.
Fight 2 with -1 to win. It's isn't
Yeah,
necessarily gonna win a
and
shield
a
wall.
terror-causing front orc line. I don't think there was a chance that was going to go well for the Goblin Town player.
Yeah.
Um,
The idea though with the pure lists is, while there are a couple of hyper competitive lists that are pure, there's only a couple, right? And they're interesting ways to counter program that are competitive, are competitive in that environment. Like for example, Army of the Dead is a good solution to the just pure Army of the Dead. Or if you have big enough points level, you could throw in Aragorn or something like that. But pure Army of the Dead is actually a really good solution to both that Witch King Numenorian list and Goblin Town. Because Goblin Town can never charge it, and it just mows through, and the Army of the Dead just kind of mows through Goblin Town. And even the Witch King Black Numenorians have problems with pure Army of the Dead, as long as the Army of the Dead can keep the king alive.
I do miss the old days when people thought that Return of the King and Army of the Dead was a good army.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean the only concern is under your specific restrictions. Pure Army of the Dead is pure Army of the Dead. And there's no putting Aragorn or anything like that in there.
Also, that sounds even more boring to use than Arnor.
It's actually kind of fun. I pulled it out and I played it. That's one of the armies that I pulled out and I played against. I just kind of played locally, and it's like again, it's not something you want to play for 6 months straight, but if you want to pull this thing out of the box and figure out kind of how it works and what its own little tricks are and how it works, it's fun to do for a tournament or a couple of, weekday games or something like that.
So essentially what we're saying is that the way to make things more interesting for players, if players are, let's say, getting a little bit bored with the stale way that normal tournaments are run, to introduce additional rules to each tournament. They don't have to be massive, but like add some sort of little variety. I've seen a bit of that happening in the UK in recent times.
Even different points levels. Like the vast majority of the tournaments I played last year were 650. And that just started to get extremely boring. Um, so, and actually, I think there was a comment on our last episode asking us to sort of talk about Nova being 1,000 points, and I'm not going to fully segue into that. But I think the fact that there is a large tournament that is not sort of confined to the 650 to 800 point threshold that we've set for ourselves is a good thing. And yeah, so just like changing up the points values of your tournaments, like throw in like a 300 point tournament or whatever, see what happens. But also, yeah, adding in special rules or anything like that, just doing something to make your tournament unique, and not just make another 650 points, no additional rules, no restrictions, go for it, sort of tournament.
Yep.
Yeah, no,
that's also where like the veto system has in a way made it worse in my view, because
I agree.
You get to actually discard the scenarios you don't like, and then if your army is a grindy army, you end up just having another grindy game.
Yeah. People have stopped caring about who their leader is because they can just say, "Oh, I'm just not going to play Contest of Champions." And as much as we hate the Contest of Champions scenario, at least I do, it serves a viable purpose in that these sorts of horde armies that don't focus a lot on their heroes get punished in that specific scenario. So that is definitely a flaw in the veto system.
I don't know. I am still firmly in the camp of the veto system, because there's nothing I hate more than a game where I see the other guy's list, they roll up the scenario, and I realize it's over, and I've just wasted the next 2 hours.
Oh
of my
yeah,
life.
I fully agree. Yeah,
I will. Yeah, I will happily go ahead and play scenarios where people aren't paying attention to who their commander is, in order to because they can dismiss Contest of Champions in order to avoid that circumstance occurring, or at least have it become extremely rare.
Here's an interesting solution: adding custom scenarios into your tournaments.
Yeah, custom.
Now this is going to be a bit harder because a lot of people are very used to just playing the same scenarios over and over again, especially if you're in like an organized league. But just putting different scenarios in that don't favor the things that our scenarios favor, right? We have like one scenario that favors your leader getting kills. We have one scenario that favors getting kill points by killing as many models as possible. And then we have a bunch of scenarios that are focused on grabbing objectives or protecting your heroes. And horde armies are good at both because they can grab all of the objectives and they can put all of their cheap heroes behind walls and walls of guys and just have their troops do the rest. And same with like smaller troop focused armies. So just swapping up the scenarios so that not necessarily they heavily favor something else, but just change up what the points are in them.
But please, everyone, play test them first. Having been at tournaments where somebody had a custom scenario and realize, when everybody at the tournament realizes about 10 minutes into their games that this is broken.
Yeah, I remember years and years ago, the first Nova, I think, so basically there was a cap of 12 victory points, even though in those days you could get far more than 12 victory points
Like
in a
90.
scenario. And yeah, in like Lords of Battle, you could get 50 bajillion points or whatever. And there were no like points for winning and losing. It was just they total up your VPs at the end of the games. So Reconnoiter popped up, and you were capped out at 12 VPs. And back in the day, you'd get one VP for every guy you got off. So one person deployed on one side of the board, one person deployed on the other side of the board. They ran their armies opposite to each other, and both of them got 12 victory points.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that is the only scenario that's the only problem with the different scenarios thing is please play test them. But yeah, so yeah, I mean, these are all ideas. Constraining the list to either the pure lists or the green armies is going to be good at some tournaments. Adding scenarios adding in special rules. Anything that's going to kind of change the equation of what's competitive and what's not.
We have the Oaths of Battle, right? Which I haven't seen that many events use.
Using what?
Like the Oaths. That's
the Oaths.
Yeah.
Well,
Same
I mean,
obviously Otacon uses its own, but other than that, I haven't seen that many events run them.
yeah. I mean, part of the reason I'm not a big fan of the O's is because I'm old and I can't keep them straight. But so I guess that's one of the disadvantages to kind of changing the rules of the game as opposed to which armies folks can bring, is that changing the rules of the game creates new things you need to think about during the game, and half to 2/3 of the time you won't remember what they are until near the end of the tournament. Whereas if what you're doing is you're putting constraints on which armies people can bring, that's all done ahead of time, and then you just play the game out the way you're used to playing it, and it's less to try and keep in your head. And us old folks, as we approach our dotage, I think tend to prefer that type of thing, where as opposed to more variables that we have to keep juggling in our head in the middle of the game. But anyway, that's just me. You youngsters may enjoy.
I mean, I'm kind of middle-aged these days.
Yeah, give it some time, Mick. You're gonna slowly shift over from Evan's camp to my camp on this, I think.
Yeah, no, I think I already am. So like when I was Evan's age, I was all just like win, destroy, crush their souls, and I'm just like I'm just gonna show up. I'm gonna roll some dice.
Yeah,
this is a little bit fun. I'm gonna end up mid tables.
Yeah, well, I mean, so
all of my recent experiences in like last year have been mid tables, and it's been fine.
Yeah, so start doing that more, Mick. Start going to like more smaller tournaments and start doing what you did with this last one, which is, I have a funky idea. I'm going to try it out. And like for you, it's going to be more about, I have this funky bag of tricks, and I'm going to take it to a tournament or two, and I'm just going to play around with it and see if it's fun or not. Whereas opposed to me, it's, I have this beautifully painted army that's like sat in a bin for 2 years. And I'm going to pull it out and play around with this and try and see how this thing works. And yeah, sure, nobody brings Balin and Chloe to a competitive tournament, but let's see what happens if you do.
This is a great segue, by the way, to our list review.
Yeah.
But shall we say our final thoughts on our view of meta stagnation and all that?
But you see, this the final point that you had, Matt, is that yes, I could bring these sorts of fun tricks and things, but that just means that I'm sacrificing any possibility of playing top tables, which is what I've always found fun. Like I've always found it really enjoyable to be playing against best players. Even if I get crushed, I still will always like the challenge.
But you've also said that now that's stopped being fun. So if that's stopped being fun, do something else
Yeah.
and see if that's fun. And who knows, maybe you'll find a bag of tricks that given the right circumstances and given the right matchups, um uh you'll actually end up on top tables again. And maybe it's a good way to, it's a good way to I mean, part of the reason I started doing what I'm doing is I decided, so taking if I'm taking like the Dragon Emperor lists, the Dragon Emperor Legendary Legion to a tournament, and it's not a competitive tournament, I'm only really going to have like one or two fun games, and the rest of the time I'm just going to be running people over. And running people over is only slightly more fun for me than it is for the guy being run over. So, why am I doing that, right? I mean, why don't I challenge myself and take something that I know is going to be, disadvantaged against the hyper competitive lists and see what I can do with it. If I lose, I lose. At least
Yeah,
I'll have fun losing, right?
I never really found running someone over to be that fun.
Well, me either. I mean, that was my point.
You either, yeah.
The only thing that's less
I
fun
love
than
seeing the
running
light in
somebody
their
over
eyes go out.
Yeah. I mean,
Well,
the only thing
I guess it depends. If it was Evan, then and I run him over, I'd be like, yeah, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me.
fair enough.
He
I mean,
deserved it.
my point was the only thing that's potentially less fun than running somebody over with a super competitive army is being run over by a super competitive army. That was the only point I was trying to make. All right. All right. So that's
we end this therapy session with Matt and Mick.
that's right.
Yeah. Well, one day I'm gonna bring
Mick, how are you feeling today?
I'm gonna bring 3 Mordor Siege posts to a tournament, and I'm gonna crush it.
Well, Devin's tried that. It was not fun.
For whom?
There are limits to this
It was
strategy.
probably fun for the opponent.
Yeah, there are limits to this strategy. It's not going to be fun to bring an army of ruffians to the table or an army of just wargs to the table.
No,
But
it isn't.
It's gonna be a workout if you bring an army of ruffians to the table.
yeah,
No,
but
it's gonna be a workout if you bring an army of wargs to the table.
yeah,
Very funny.
bring something that's competitive, just not necessarily super competitive.
Sure.
All right. So we're ready to talk lists? Let's talk lists.
Sure, let's do it.
Sure.
So you have Balin and Floy and a ballista. Oof.
Hold on. I had this somewhere. Insert elevator music here. Thank you, Dad. All right. We are here. All right. So, this is from Luis 4748, and they say, "Hey, I'm going to a friendly tournament in May. Checking our watches here, it looks like we've maybe made it in before they've submitted their list, so that would be nice. It's 625 points, one army, so it can be blue v blue. 3 games and random scenarios. I thought about starting a new Khazad Dûm Moria project with an Iron Guard heavy list. Don't see that a lot. Please review/comment. Here we go. And I guess I'll just go over the list quick and then read the college essay that they've submitted under it really quickly. So it has Balin, 7 Iron Guard, 2 Khazad Guard, 5 Dwarf Warriors with bow, 1 Ranger with bow and throwing axe, King's Champion with the 2 Heralds, obviously, 5 Iron Guard, 2 Khazads, 2 Bowmen, 1 Ranger with bow and throwing axe, and then the Dwarf Ballista with an extra crew member. I'm sure we will discuss that in depth. So basically, this is a lot of words here. But he basically says that he wants to spam Iron Guards. and keep defense 6 as a baseline, with the rest being dwarf warriors with bows. Khazad guards are for tanking strength 4 heroes or terror, sure. Dwarf rangers climb stuff and shoot things. The ballista is supposed to keep them safe from shooting armies, especially crossbows or strength 2 bowmen spam like Harad. The reason being that they would just shoot out all of the 15-point Iron Guard. Fair enough. Ideally, if my opponent runs towards me, you can even use the Might from the Ballista Captain for a heroic move. They're just sort of saying how they would play here. Bad matchups would be defense 7 armies. Magic would be unpleasant. Cheers. Okay. So that's the basic summary of the list. It's basically just 2 warbands of dwarves with a lot of Iron Guard, Balin and the King's Champion, and then a dwarf ballista with an extra guy. So the list is definitely interesting. I'll give them that. The first thing that immediately pops out, and I'm sure it popped out to you too as well, is that Balin's warband is not full. It is 15 models, not 18. So the easiest thing to do would be to drop the extra crew member, rejigger things around, and just put another guy that doesn't need to stay within 6 inches of the dwarf ballista in Balin's warband. I also, my personal taste is I don't like the almost complete lack of defense 7 on the dwarves. It feels to me like that's sort of the point of dwarves. And I get like wanting to keep the Iron Guard, sure, but I don't know if I really like all of the dwarf warriors with bow that exist. I think I would personally swap the majority of them for warriors with shields, just in case the opponent weighs the odds and goes, I can probably outshoot this dwarf ballista with my crossbows or whatever. You can instead put the dwarf warriors with shields in front of the Iron Guard and then close, instead of fighting a losing bow battle. But yeah, that's my initial initial thoughts. We can talk a little bit more about Iron Guards and their viability later, but what were you guys thinking?
So, I mean, I guess a couple small points. There is actually a viable argument for giving an extra crew member to the dwarf ballista because it's only got 2 guys. And what you can have happen is, Legolas rocks up within 24 inches of this thing, shoots one of the crew members, and then you've got this like useless dwarf ballista. So I don't think having one extra guy on the ballista is necessarily a bad thing. I guess I have 2 kind of bigger problems with this list. One is that Flowy is not there, and Flowy is what makes the Balin list fun. And a King's Champion and Balin, even at 625 points on their own, are the King's Champion is good, Balin is good, but both of them can be taken out by something that's really good. Or excellent, because the King's Champion's only got 2 might. Balin has, I don't know if he's got 2 or 3, but he's got 3 might, but he's only got the 2 attacks. And what really makes this army what makes this army function, or at least function in a fun way, is Flowy. And just the shenanigans you can get up to, like turning off other guys' special rules. Which can do things to keep Balin and the King's Champion alive. Like, turning off Fly on Fell Beasts, or turning off Monstrous Charge, or turning off the Crown, and stuff like that. on the critical turns. So it would be great if Flowey could get into this list somehow. I also find that Iron Guards and Khazad Guards outside of Durin's list just aren't worth the points. And this has a lot of both. And you know, I'm worried that this list just isn't going to stand up. Because the Iron Guards die, and when one of them goes down, it's just so incredibly expensive. And the Khazad Guards can't win fights, and you know they're tougher, but even they die. And then once kind of you get beyond that, you know, you've got a bunch of dwarves with bows, and I'm not sure that's gonna do it. But
Yeah.
before we talk about modifying this, that's kind of my big thought. I mean, my big thought is I don't think, and I get that the whole bunch of basically the Iron Guard battle line is the concept here, and I'm not sure the concept works.
Yeah, like the most fun thing you can do against an Iron Guard army is just send a random fight 5 captain and take out 2 Iron Guards in a single turn.
Oh, sending in just a random guy on a horse with fight 5 and strength 4 and just calling a heroic combat and killing 60 points of models in one turn is the best feeling ever. Your opponents are going to be very happy.
Yeah, so generally with dwarf lists throughout the years, what I always found works really well with them is having the ability to shield and having the defense 7. So here, the ballista is all good, except dwarf warriors are only 18-inch range, so you're not really gonna outshoot anything like a Harad list or anything else that shoots at 24. And
well, I mean, you can close within 18. I find that to be
sure.
I find that to be less of an issue. It's just more kind of the sheer numbers.
Yeah, like you're gonna be facing, let's say, with your 9 bows and a ballista, you might be facing like 17 or 20 bows or something like that, and then you're not really outshooting it anyway. And then with your defense 5 and 6 across the whole army, your opponent doesn't even have to move. And
Yeah,
you're the one who
words
has to go
cannot
forward.
describe how important defense 7 is against shooting. Like it turns lists that need blinding light into lists that don't need blinding light. And that's one of the benefits of taking dwarves is you just have a ton of defense 7 guys and you just don't care about shooting. And this list does. And sadly, it doesn't really get a lot in exchange for being weak to that. Like the reason we're struggling to make changes to this list without like completely changing it is the 2 things dwarves are best at, which is weathering strength 4 heroes and just ignoring shooting completely, are 2 things that this list cannot do. And that sort of emphasizes why everyone always says it's so valuable to make your dwarves defense 7.
Yeah, I mean this also doesn't have a captain or a king in it, so it can't march.
It can march, ball in his march.
Oh, can, that's right. Ball in his march. Disregard that. So yeah, okay. So I guess it could do that. It could just march into combat. But if you're going to march into combat, you don't want the ballista. And I wonder if. So I mean, I think in this particular list, I think the ballista goes because I don't think.
Issue then is, would you put in what, Flowey instead?
So
right, because you don't have enough warband slots to just take more guys.
Yeah, no, I think you put in. I think you put in Flowey. I mean, and I think you could drop at least some
Flowey
of
is what, 70?
He's 75, I think.
Okay.
And this ballista is, I think, 68. So that's almost about the same.
Take that, drop a guy, and then you've got.
Or just convert your Khazids into dwarves with bows.
Yeah, that's the issue, right?
Dwarf.
Is if you do that and don't change the Iron Guards, which I assume you're suggesting that you change some Iron Guards into Dwarf Warriors with
I,
shields.
I think you get rid of the Khazids before you get rid of the Iron Guard, because I think the Khazids are
The
of
issue
less
is
use than the Iron Guard.
The Khazids give you less points back. The Khazids give you 2 points back if you change them into a Dwarf Warrior with shield. And
That's all
the
you need.
Iron
You get
Guards give you like 6.
Yeah, but that's you only need 7 points to replace the Dwarf Ballista with Flowey. So if you get rid of
Yeah,
your 4 Khazid guards and turn them into dwarves with shields, then you've done it.
I just really don't like going below 30 models with a list like this.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not going to argue that some of the Iron Guards shouldn't go away too. I'm just pointing out that the first thing that happens is the Khazids go away. Because unless you're doing something with Vault Wardens where spears get behind the Khazids, the Khazids just don't win fights with their two-handed weapons unless you got Durin around.
Yeah. The only time I really take Khazids are if I'm allying in elves, because then they're the most efficient troop available for that.
Yeah.
But I mean, I hate to be the guy who just suggests taking spears in a non-spear army, but Vault Wardens are so good.
Yeah.
And being able to have access to spears is such an important trait in an army. And if you're not taking spears in a dwarf army, it better be big and it better be bulky. And this is neither of those things, which makes it challenging.
Yeah, I recently took an army that was Balin. It was a larger points version than this, but it was Balin, Flowey, King's Champion, King. And I think I chose not to take the ballista because I had plenty of march in that army. And then I took 10 Vault Warden teams. And if you want to make shooting irrelevant, put a line of Vault Warden teams up in front of the shooting and just kind of walk forward behind the movable barrier.
So what I would recommend for people playing that army is to put dwarf guys with shields as you're advancing forward in between your spearmen and your shieldmen. Because what tends to happen is people start shooting at the spearmen, and each spearman dead is an unviable shieldman. So just make sure to protect your spearmen when you're doing that. Anyways, I digress.
But I mean, the shieldman though, I mean, to kill him with shooting though, it's really hard to kill a shieldman with shooting because you got to hit first, then you got to get past the guy with the big iron wall, which is a 50-50, and then you still got to kill defense 6. So it's still hard to kill the shieldman with shooting.
With say for example 12 crossbows, you're killing like 1 or 2 spearmen a turn, which is not insignificant. But we've gone very far past our original intention, which is to discuss this list here. And I mean, I hate to be the person that says Fallen, King's Champ, Flowey, drop all of the Khazid guards, drop a bunch of the Iron Guards, take a bunch of Dwarf Warriors with shields, get as many models as you can, and then just run forward and fight and just completely change the list. But
that sounds like you are that guy.
I always am that guy. I just say I hate to be it, to pretend. The issue is, if you have fun with this list, you have fun with this list. Take the list. I would recommend, if you don't want to drop the ballista, if you don't want to drop the Iron Guards, I would recommend getting more Dwarf Warriors with shields so you can at least put some sort of line between your Iron Guards and the bowmen and tank heroes somehow. Um, but it's not what I would consider the optimal Khazad-dûm list, and I think at this points level, even the optimal Khazad-dûm list is not the greatest thing in the world.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think at this level, I think I probably, yeah, at this level, what I would be doing with this list is I would just drop the Iron Guards and Khazad guards into a combination of ordinary guys and Vault Wardens, and then I'm not sure how many points that may actually save you enough points to get Flowy in this list and keep the ballista. But if you
I
have
wouldn't go that far.
to get rid of the ballista, get rid of the ballista.
Yeah.
And maybe put in a captain or if you can squeeze in a captain or a king with Flowy just to get some extra march in there, because part of the problem with Balin is if you're spending his might to march the army into place, then your army leader ends up having a real, you end up with an almost mightless army leader by the time you get into combat. And since Balin isn't the strongest guy anyway, that can be a real problem. Yeah, so, but if you want to do the Iron Guard, I would get rid of, I mean, I think I'd get rid of some of them, and so you can at least have defend 7 dwarves in front. And maybe get rid of the dwarf warriors with bow and just change them into dwarf warriors with shield, and just say, I'm not going to shoot with this army. I'm just going to close and kill. Because I think you're going to have better luck just getting at your enemy than you are trying to convince the enemy to charge you. Any last thoughts?
I mean,
No,
it's
that's pretty much it.
yeah. Good luck with it. Tell us what design you choose to stick with. I mean, I assume you're not going to do the major changes we were talking about, because you said that you wanted the list to have a lot of Iron Guards and these other things. And I think we've discussed that competitive wise, Iron Guard are not good. But if that's what you want to play, that's what you want to play. I think minor changes I mentioned very early on, and Dad mentioned recently, that you should probably change the bowman into shieldman, and then maybe add Flowey or do something else. But yeah, tell us how it goes.
Yep. And add Flowy. Flowy is always fun. Even if you end up losing, he always produces a fun time, because it's always just a fun intellectual exercise to figure out which special rules or war gear are going to be the best things for him to turn off. And there's bunches of ways that you can actually use that to kind of limit your shooting casualties by turning off the betrayer's special rule, for example, with the poison, or turning off Dwinhere's special rule.
Turning off the shade.
Yeah, turning off the shade, turning off the Witch King's crown if he's on horse, for example. All sorts of fun stuff you can do. And he can only do it 3 times, or sometimes 4 if you manage to kill a hero. But so you got to
turn off the Witch King's crown. Can you turn off war gear?
You can turn off war gear. You turn off special rules and war gear. So, all right, have fun with it. All right, everybody. So I think that brings us to the end of this episode. We'll keep grinding these things out when we have time. It's not going to be the once every week thing that we were able to do in COVID. None of us really have the time to do that anymore, but we'll try and get one out once a month. So hopefully we'll be talking to you soon.
All right.